Mike Franklin, the property tax guy. Today, we're going to talk about whether or not the municipality is trying to squeeze you for more money by raising your assessment. And so I'm going to explain how that works. Basically, if the assessor raises your assessment, the municipality does not get more money. If your assessment is lowered, it doesn't mean they get less money. Either way, they get the same amount of money. So by increasing your assessment, that doesn't get them more money. So they're not trying to squeeze you for money. What they're trying to do is establish an equitable distribution of the tax burden. And they theoretically do that by accurately valuing your property and all the other properties in the municipality. And so then they take the fair market value of your property and they divide it by the total of all fair market values in the municipality. And that's your percentage of the tax burden. So whatever the budget is times your percentage is what your taxes are going to be. So yes, if your assessment is higher, your taxes do go up. But that just means that everybody else pays less. So the municipality does not get more money. So they're not squeezing you for more money. They're just they're supposed to be trying to accurately value your property. Well, there's a lot of things that go on, in the assessment process. It's a very difficult thing to do, is to try to get every property in the municipality accurately valued. Big job, basically impossible to do. But it's their job to follow the procedures that the state has set up, and the state provides training manuals. I think one of them is like 1,200 pages long, and then there's the assessor's manual. The section that talks about condition and grade and how to establish condition and grade and so on and so forth. And so they, supposed to be following these procedures, and they have training to do that. And in theory, they're trying to follow that and follow the law and do the best job they can of valuing the property. The reality is all kinds of things happen. There's laziness, there's incompetence, there's cronyism, and sometimes there's outright fraud that goes on. And any various combination in between. In some of these small towns, it's very difficult for them to get a competent assessor, but also the assessor is appointed by the town board and the town supervisor, or by the mayor and the common council if it's a city. And that appointment process is rather imperfect. They tend to appoint their crony friends, people who don't necessarily have valuation experience or legal experience, and sometimes it can be hard to find in a very small municipality. But they should make a good faith effort to find the most qualified people to do the job properly. But oftentimes they do not. The city of Syracuse, for example, is an absolute disaster. These people have no valuation skills. One guy's the brother of the former city auditor, and it's just no. He's a real estate agent, for God's sake. I don't know what that has to do with real estate valuation. They need to do better, and so they need to make a good faith effort to appoint people to their board of assessment review. That can act in good faith. That's all we're asking for is a little good faith. But in theory, they're not squeezing your money for money. Although sometimes they'll put their thumb on the scale and take it easy on their cronies, or sometimes they'll attempt to, help people that are maybe elderly and stuff. But that's not their job. Their job is to establish fair market value. The exemption process is, where you deal with elderly and things of that nature, but the assessor is supposed to find fair market value. And anyway, like I said, it's a difficult job, 1,200-page manual. Um, and, um, and you know, it's a difficult job to get right all the time. All I ask them to do is act in good faith. So when a taxpayer has a concern, I expect the assessor to get back to them promptly, look into their concerns in good faith, and either make an adjustment or politely appoint them to their appeal options, you know, which is the Board of Assessment Review and Small Claims Assessment Review. And but some of them get downright vindictive. They don't like their authority questioned. They have these little fiefdoms. A lot of it's ego, so on and so forth. And so you know, it's a lot of bureaucracy going on, and sometimes when that gets out of whack, then people need to give me a call, and I can deal with it for them, and you know, get to the bottom of what's right. You know, there is an appeal process. Um, I think it was about 1982, they instituted the small claims assessment review process. Basically, because they were required to do that in New York State because there were weaknesses in the constitutional protections of property rights. So they created this informal process, you know, so people didn't have to go through the cost and expense, you know, and time of Supreme Court and so on and so forth. So that's their attempt at meeting their obligations to the Constitution, but it's not always, you know, perfect, and it can be complicated. But basically, in theory, they're not squeezing you for more money. Raising your assessment does not make them more money. The budget is the budget. The budget establishes how much money they get. So you should vote on the school budget every year. And you need to vote for your local and county officials. You know, if they're spending money like crazy, you got to get rid of them. That's where the high taxes come from. Town of Manlius, for example, they wanted to build a new town hall. There's absolutely nothing with the town hall that they have. They just want to spend more money. They wanted to do a community pool. Well, maybe the community wants the pool, but their tax rate is already one of the most ridiculously high that there is in all the municipalities I've dealt with, which is 42 counties to date. You can see behind me is the map of judicial districts. I've done the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th judicial district, most of upstate New York. And Manlius is, you know, relative to the values of the properties and their tax rate is it's just outrageous, and they want to spend more. And you know, maybe people are good with that, maybe they're not. But you always have the option to pick up and move someplace else. If you got kids in that school district, it might be a good deal for you. If you don't, it might not. So those are the things that you need to consider. They're not squeezing you for more money. The budgets are what are squeezing you for money. It's a question of whether or not they accurately calculated the fair market value of your property to determine what your assessment should be. And if they calculated it too high, it could be either excessive, you can't sell it for that amount, or unequal, in that there's other properties as good or better that are assessed for less. Like, for example, their crony friends, or maybe people on the town board. Well, you can check for those things. It does happen. All kinds of things happen. And I did mention laziness, incompetence, cronyism, and fraud. Laziness is obvious. Incompetence is obvious. Cronyism, I just explained, and then there's outright fraud. It's very difficult to get data out of these people, so it's hard to know what it is they're doing behind closed doors. There's nothing. There's no fraud that's easier than assessment fraud. All they need to do is click their mouse, and who's to say? They can change the classification. They can change figures, and you know, they have wide discretion to do as they please. So who's to know? Who's to know? And so, for example, back in the day at Kodak, this assessor got together with an appraiser and somebody inside at Kodak, and the assessor would artificially raise Kodak's assessments, countless millions of dollars, and then the inside guy at Kodak would hire their buddy, the appraiser, and the appraisal would help the assessor justify reducing the assessment, and then they'd split the proceeds to the tunes of millions of dollars. And 2 of them end up dying in jail. But those are the ones that got caught. What about the ones that don't? Same thing happened to the biggest buildings in Manhattan. It was a 35-year-long kickback scheme going on. And so who knows what goes on in these small towns. And in the city of Syracuse, I believe one deputy assessor spent or not, I don't know if he was convicted of 5 years in prison. Kickback scheme, I believe it was. But who's to know what goes on, when nobody's looking, you just click their mouse. So there can be fraud. I'm not saying it's everywhere. I'm just saying it's a little hard to know, when there's, favoritism going on. But what I run into a lot is people buying second homes upstate. These small towns like to stick it to the out of town people they perceive to be rich and take it easy on their crony friends. It happens every day. And it comes down to making an argument, excessive and unequal. And if you get that assessor data, you can calculate these things quantitatively. And that's my job, to do that, do the research, get the data, and do the analysis and make the argument. This is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy.